I'm Ayamanatara. This is my first video podcast. We have Ginger here off camera, and she's going to be asking me some questions, and I'll do a little bit of channeling. We'll see where this goes.
So what are your feelings about Saturn moving into Sagittarius and all this expansive energy we're feeling right now?
Well, I mean, Saturn's an interesting planet. It's so restrictive, and Sag obviously is not. Saturn always looks to me, persona-wise, kind of like he's somewhere in between Father Time and Father Christmas for me, visually. He's not quite as cranky old man as some people get. But he does have some fairly strict energy. It's important to follow the rules, and it's important to know the rules before you start breaking them. I think that we get a lot more leeway and flexibility if we understand the structures that we're operating with. We can start to move outside those boundaries a little more if we really understand what it is that we're doing. I don't think that the restriction is so strict, as long as we already have an understanding of the structures. And when you get into stuff like karma, it becomes very interesting because we do have the option of opting out of karma. And so we get to completely bypass that strictness, that path, but it requires that we live under the laws, that we live under the laws of forgiveness instead. So karma to me is, and I've said this before, but not for this audience, karma to me is like you have a backpack, and anytime anything happens, whether we do something, someone else does something, there's an event that we decide to hold on to, we pick up a rock and we stick it in our backpack. And that backpack gets pretty heavy pretty fast because we hold on to a lot of stuff. But we can choose to put down the backpack. We can choose to not pick up any more rocks, and we do that through forgiveness. It takes a concerted effort. It's not something that we're taught, especially not from a young age. And so we carry around a lot of stuff that we're playing out over and over again until we heal that originating wound. And so if I choose instead to practice forgiveness, which basically just means you don't get rent-free space in my head anymore. I'm not picking up a rock and putting it in my backpack, or I'm taking that rock out and going, I don't want this anymore. Then I am no longer subject to playing that tape over and over again, which is really what patterns in our lives are, and that's what karma is. Karma is a choice. We pick up, we hold on to something from that event, that occurrence, that action, and that's what sets up the cycle, because we're constantly being drawn back to that originating wound. So as far as Saturn and Sagittarius goes, this is a great opportunity really for people to step out of that rut, which is what it is for most people, of karma, of patterns, and do something else. We've got a lot of energy going on right now that's very revolutionary, and so this is the perfect time to kind of go, well, let's do something different. I don't want to do that anymore. How do I step out of those patterns? How do I not allow myself to be restricted by the patterns and the limitations that I've chosen, that I've taken on? It is a free will universe, and we don't have to operate by those laws that we were taught over time, that we had to adhere to. I think we are taught to hold on to stuff rather than let them go. And so I see Saturn and Sagittarius as an opportunity to really just do that differently. I mean, that's all, of course, on a very purely personal scale. On a more global scale, it's still all about having the option to do something differently. You know, to change the rules, to rewrite the rules, to rewrite the structures that we've been living under. Whether we do that or not is always interesting, because we have so much energy. I mean, not we personally, but we as a society, as a global people, have so much invested in maintaining the status quo, of holding it up, even though it's crumbling. You know, the foundation is going. And whether we choose to do something about it now, or we're forced to do something about it later, it's going to go. Do we want to be active participants in that? Or do we want to just stand by and watch it happen? Either way, it's going to go at some point. Right now, it's being held up by a lot of power, money, energy. We're going to have to change at some point. Why not now? What does that look like? I don't know. We still got to rewrite the rules, and I think that as far as a global population goes, we need to do that together. You know, and so it's going to require a lot more conversations. You know, and we have so much technology these days that allows us to have these global conversations about rewriting how we are and who we are and how shit works. That we can do that. I find it interesting that it's happening all over the world, and the place where it seems to be happening the least is the United States. And and yet the energy of the U.S. has been one of newness and change and embracing new ideas. And somewhere along the way, we just got stuck. You know, and I think it does have a lot to do with, you know, the powers that be trying to keep their power structure in place. Hey, you want to be on camera? But we'll see, you know, if enough people decide to stop being sheep, something will change. You know, and we have little rumbles of it here and there, and I think that with the discussions that are going on about equality in all of the different forums, you know, whether it's racial equality, gender equality, religious equality, it's starting to happen. We'll just see how long it takes to get enough momentum going to actually create change. But I think that's all kind of a function of Saturn and Sag.
We just had a full moon in Cancer, the sun's in Capricorn, and there seems to be a lot of energy around hearth and home, and people I know are, you know, suddenly needing to move and find a different place to live, and it's all kind of being shaken up. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, more interesting to me than the full moon in Cancer was the fact that at the exact moment that she went into full moon, she also went void of course. And void of course to me is always like being in between signs. I mean, I realize she's not actually in between signs, but the energy of limbo is there. You know, there's a lot of like free-form, foundationless stuff going on. And when you add that to the wateriness of Cancer, you know, it does create that feeling of crumbling foundations, the feeling of not having the ground under your feet. Hey, come on up. This is Moop. It creates that wateriness. You know, we've already shifted out of that, but it went for over 24 hours, which is huge. We usually don't have the moon void that long. And going from that fluid, holy shit, shit, I don't know what's going on kind of thing, that limbo, into Leo, which is where the moon is now. That's my dog. He's barking. That's a weird noise. Going into Leo is, it's jarring, you know? Apparently we're having a pet break. Anyway, it's jarring to have that weird fluidity and then going into such a strong sign. And, you know, it gives us the opportunity once again to wake up, to change things. You know, hopefully it shakes people awake. I haven't been poking around online enough today to see, like, you know, what that's brought us in the news and in, you know, things like Twitter traffic, you know, which is usually how I watch the flow of what's going on globally, is through Twitter, because it's a great river stream that way. You can really see stuff. And I've been writing classes and stuff today, so I haven't really had a chance to watch what the river's doing. But it's an opportunity. I mean, anytime that there's any sort of what we perceive as a challenge, it's really an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity to change how we've done things. It's an opportunity to do something differently. It's an opportunity to shift, to heal. And whether we take that up or not is really kind of a product of how conscious we are about our growth, and how conscious we are about where we are and what we're feeling. What I would hope is that all of these fun little energetic earthquakes are starting to wake people up so that they are more aware, so that they can do something differently. You know, the opportunity is always there. We just don't always know that we're supposed to pick it up.
And what do you see coming this year, Natara? I know you said that right now the chickens are really coming home to roost.
Yeah, they've been coming home to roost since the end of last year. I don't necessarily see specific things happening so much as the opportunities that are coming. You know, I do see that people who choose to live under the laws of karma are getting their butts kicked. You know? And I mean, honestly, that's most of us. You know, at least in Western society, that's most of us. It's not typical for our society to live under the laws of forgiveness, especially not in the United States. I think you see more and more of it in Europe. But it's not... Americans aren't particularly good at that, you know? And that, more than anything else, is creating challenges. You know, it's creating challenges for us on a political level, it's creating challenges for us on a social level, and it's creating challenges for us on a personal level. You know, all of those places where we have chosen not to grow, not to change, not to repair, it's time, you know? Even to the point where I've been getting sort of nudges, I want to say, not like full-blown messages, but nudges from, you know, the energies that watch the planet and that try to help us and try to protect us but can't do anything unless we ask, kind of stuff. You know, if you want to call that angels, great. If you want to call that ETs, fine. You know, whatever. But, I mean, there are energies that watch us and that try to help. And they're getting kind of bored with us not picking up the stick. You know, with us choosing not to make change. And, you know, they're not really necessarily going to force the issue. Excuse me. Because that's not appropriate, and that's not, it's a violation of free will. It's not the sort of energy that they have. But they're definitely encouraging us to make those changes, and helping our higher selves put into motion opportunities to really kind of say, all right, so you have some very clear choices here. Do you want the blue pill? Do you want the red pill? Do you want to change? Do you want to grow? Do you want to evolve? Do you want to step into a new reality? Or do you want to just keep doing the same old because it's going to get more and more painful? Because it's not what's in anyone's best interest. Even the people in power who think that it's in their best interest, it's not in their best interest because it's keeping them stuck just as much as us. This paradigm of money and power isn't serving anybody the way we're doing it right now. That's not to say that money's bad. I don't think that money's bad. I think that making money God is not good. I think that it gets in our way. It's not empowering. We're making a hypothetical construct that hasn't even been imbued with the idea of love into the end all be all. Does that make sense? Right now, we treat money as God, as the divine, as the all-powerful. You look at the language we use about, you look at the language that we use about money, and people are losing faith in the economy, and it's not healthy. It's one thing to give that much power to an archetype that does embody love. Whether we want to call that the divine, whether we want to call that a specific deity, whether we want to call that Jesus, whether we want to call that Buddha, whatever. That at least has the ability to give us comfort and to help us change. Money is not imbued with any of those particular aspects. It's just power. And by giving all of our power to power, we completely disempower ourselves. I find working with archetypes, deities, gods, goddesses, angels, all that kind of stuff to be really helpful. It gives us a place to focus our energy. But really what we're doing through all of that, at least what I would hope that we're doing through all of that, is learning to empower ourselves. Learning to find that God seed within us that connects to those archetypes so that we can channel that energy in positive ways ourselves, as opposed to just giving it away to something like money. I mean, money is a fictional construct. It's not backed by anything. It's the idea that these pieces of paper have value. That's all it is. And it only works because people agree to it. Kind of like time, but that's an entirely different subject. And if we keep putting our energy and our empowerment, or giving our empowerment away to that, we're going to push our extinction. I mean, I don't know how else to look at it. And because I don't necessarily see that extinction to be terribly likely, something's going to have to change. And this is a really strong year for stuff to change. I mean, numerologically, it's an 8-year universally. And 8 is infinite. It is that Sagittarius energy, And I think that the critical mass of conversations that are going on about equality have the potential to kick that to the next level. You know, it's a little disheartening because I've been watching us for like the last 20 years do this kind of stop-start thing with change energy, you know. And every time we have a major global disaster, that opportunity comes up again. Every time that we have a massive terrorist attack, that opportunity comes up again. You know, and the last few years, you know, I saw it with Occupy, you know, where there was this upswell of potential change energy, and then it just melted back down again. And we're seeing it again with, you know, sadly, with, you know, people raising their awareness about, you know, the deaths of young black men and stuff like that. But again, that same swell is happening. And I think it's building on some of the energy that happened with Occupy. And it's not like Occupy ever went away, it just went out of people's awareness. And that's in part because the media is owned by, like, you know, the same people who are in power. I mean, it's owned by less than 1% of the population. And so it's easy for those power structures to shift stuff out of our awareness. But more and more people are relying on social media and the internet for more of their news. And so the opportunity comes to circumvent those corrals that they keep trying to, you know, shunt us down. And honestly, I think that that's at the root of the current net neutrality fight that's going on. You know, if they can manage, I think that the powers that be, if they think that if they can manage to throttle certain avenues on the internet, that they can regain control of the information. I don't think it's going to happen. Even if net neutrality dies a sad, sad death, I don't think it's going to happen. There's too much groundswell. There was a technology that came out of the China protests that completely circumvents the internet for social media. It's cell phone to cell phone. You know, and if they can get it going in China where everything is so restricted, you know, we can play with that too. You know, if they really want to throttle our information, there are other ways. There are other ways to create networks. We don't have to go through what's becoming archaic, you know, this structure that was created by DARPA. The internet was created by DARPA, which is a government think tank. And so maybe it's time to move past that. I mean, I don't think that the government controls it nearly as much as they'd like to. And I think that with things like net neutral, you know, trying to get rid of net neutrality, they're grasping at straws. But I think that it's transcendable, you know. And so I think 2015 is a year of real possibilities where we can really redefine not just what we do, but how we do it. You know? And there's nothing that says that we have to continue doing things the way we've done them. In fact, there's a lot that says that that's a horrible plan. You know? More and more the evidence is saying, you know, okay, so environment, just as an example. I don't think there's any credible scientist or doctor who says that there isn't an environmental component to cancer. Right? It has a lot to do with what we surround ourselves with, what we put in our bodies, whether it's breathing, eating, drinking, whatever. And right now the rate of cancer is 1 in 4. 1 in 4 people over the course of their lifetime will get cancer. That's what happens when we keep doing what we're doing. So it's time to do something else. You know, I think that, okay, 1 in 4 people in the United States. I don't know what the global figures are. I suspect that they're much, much lower because we eat like crap, we breathe like crap, we drink like crap. We are so much less concerned for all of the fitness nuts we have, you know, here in California and whatever. We are so unaware of what we're putting in our body. So much of the stuff that we think is healthy that we're putting in our bodies is crap. It's energetically depleted. You know, anything prepackaged has been energetically depleted. You know, I'm always telling my students, and you know this, that cooking is a form of spellcasting. It's a form of magic, and it takes on the energy of everybody who's involved in making that food. And so when you have prepackaged stuff, first of all, just on like a food level, you take stuff, you break it down, you take out all the good stuff, you put fake good stuff back in, you mush it back together, and then you serve it. What? Right? And on an energetic level, you have so many people touching it, not to make it healthy, but to destroy stuff that's in it. And we're taking on all of that energy when we put it in our mouths if we don't energetically cleanse the food first. You know, and all of these, you know, vegetarian options that are out there and stuff. You can eat incredibly healthily as a vegetarian, but I don't think most people do. I think they eat a really high ratio of starch. And you look at the ingredients in like one of these, you know, like meat substitute breakfast sausage patties, just as an example. I'm not going to name any brands because I don't want to, you know, point at anybody in particular, but in general, you know, these pre-made meat substitute patty things are full of so much crap, and they're really high in sodium, and there's not a high nutritional value. Okay, great, it's a meat substitute. First of all, if you don't want to eat meat, don't eat meat. You know, if you miss meat, go eat meat. You know, yes, eat sustainably harvested, ethically raised meat. But if you miss meat, go eat meat. Don't eat some kind of a substitute that's basically a whole bunch of chemicals wadded up with like some decomposed vegetable matter and think that you're doing yourself some good. In Europe, when people tend to eat freshly bought, freshly harvested foods that haven't been frozen, that they've bought like that day or the day before at the market, and they met the people who were involved in bringing that food to market, was usually the farmer. You know, and even if they're going to a grocery store, there's still fewer steps between field and store. And they're cooking things that are fresh, and it doesn't matter how many stories are out there, you know, news stories and scientific studies about how the French, who eat all of this butter and all of this oil, are much healthier, have fewer cancers, fewer heart disease, lower cholesterol than Americans. People don't get that it's about how the food is made, how the food is brought to table, that is more important than how much fat it has in it. You know? So we have to change how we approach what we put in our bodies. You know, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's been a lot of news stories about like solar power in Germany. It's like half as much sun as we do here in California. And they're replacing nuclear power plants. And there's considerably less waste. There's considerably less environmental hazard. Is it completely clean? No. Is it better than what we have? Oh yeah. And the argument that people come up with when you say, well, here's a solution, here's something that's better, they go, well, it's not perfect, we shouldn't do it. Nothing's ever going to be perfect. Perfect is an ideal. Move toward the ideal or move away from the ideal. But understand that it's an ideal. You don't have to do it perfectly in order to start moving in that direction. Yeah, that's been one of the ludicrous things to me about Obamacare is people are, oh, well, it's not perfect. No, it's not. It's better than what we had. Let's take that as a starting point and continue to improve. It used to be that American industry would take something that already existed, more than invent something new, and go, okay, how do we make that better? And we've stopped doing that in the last 20, 30 years. That's why our economy is dying. We no longer care about making something better. And I don't think that the powers that be see that. They don't see long term. They don't see far enough down the line to understand that improving what we have, rather than looking at the almighty dollar in the immediate future, like 2 quarters ahead, is going to get anybody anywhere. So they're constantly in a state of panic, and everybody's constantly in a state of panic about the economy, which is this fictional construct that only exists because we all agree to it. So these are some of the things that we have the opportunity to change this year. I think it's in September. Which numerologically, of course, is the most intense month of the year. Saturn goes retrograde into Scorpio briefly, and then comes back out. And I see a lot of really interesting stuff happening during that. I mean, if you look at historically the things that have happened during that pattern, you've got the stock market crash of 87. You've got the stock market crash of 29. You've got the Challenger disaster. You've got all kinds of stuff that happened Saturn retrograde Scorpio. And so that, I think it's a 3-month window, I could be wrong. But that window, is kind of the universe, one of it's a big opportunity to create change. Wouldn't it be great if we could start to create change before that, so that we don't have to be broadsided into change? But I really think that we're going to change this year no matter what, whether we do it kicking and screaming or whether we do it embracing it. I would rather embrace it, and the good news is that individuals on a personal level can embrace that and not be as impacted by whatever drama happens on a global scale, because everything that's big these days is global. We're no longer these tiny little bedroom countries, So I think, you want to talk chickens coming home to roost. This is, the giant eagle coming home to roost. Right now we're still at chickens, and it's easier to do something about it. It's still not comfortable. We don't change willingly unless we get uncomfortable. It's a sad truth. We each get to decide personally, where that uncomfortable starts. And I always try to raise the bar so that I can start to change the minute I become uncomfortable, rather than, oh God, I've been uncomfortable for 2 years, maybe I should do something about this, And we do have that opportunity, but, right now, while it's just chickens, we can make changes. Or we can wait until, I say eagles, but I'm picturing those eagles in the latest Hobbit movie, which are really, the size of like pterodactyls. We can wait till the pterodactyls come home to roost. Not fun. It's gonna, I think that whatever that is gonna happen, and I think it's gonna happen in September, because that's the crescendo of the year. And it may be another stock market crash. It may be a stock market crash paired with some earth movement. I'm seeing a lot of changes in how Gaia is shrugging, which is kind of how I view earthquakes. And so we may have some quakes in unanticipated places. Yeah. I do know that Texas was shaking today, which is always interesting to me. That may be a product of fracking, I don't know. But anytime something in the Midwest swath there shakes, I always start looking towards New Madrid, because New Madrid is so due. And the last big earthquake they had, they reversed the Mississippi. So that could be fun. And by fun, I mean startling and traumatic. But I do think that we're in for change this year. Whether we do it consciously or in a forced manner is up to us. And the more every individual who is aware and conscious works towards change, not just personally but in their communities, the easier it's going to be for everybody come September. I think a lot of high-powered folks in business and politics are probably going to have a really rude awakening in September. Because I think we've gone beyond the place where they can stop or rewrite what's happening. So, we'll see. We also, the storms, the weather patterns we've been having have been getting stronger and stronger. And I do see the possibility of some really killer and superstorms this year. We'll see how this winter goes, but I think by summer at the latest we're going to see some big ones, which summer, of course, means hailstorms, means tornadoes, means out-of-season hurricanes. Could be interesting. We'll see. I'm not holding out a lot of hope that California's drought is going to go away as quickly as people think it's going to. I don't mean the general populace. I mean, when I talk to people who actually watch realistic weather patterns in California, they're all saying, oh, well, this will blow over fairly soon. I'm not sure that it will because of the changing weather patterns globally. Stuff is changing so rapidly in Antarctica, ice-wise, that it's changing all of the oceanic patterns. And that influences our weather more than anything else. And people haven't necessarily been talking about this, but, if you'll remember when people were talking about holes in the ozone layer, where were they? They were over Australia, they were over Antarctica, they were over southern Chile. They were all in that, bottom of the southern hemisphere, which is where we're having high incidence of melt, which is changing the temperature in the oceans, which is creating more freeze in some places and is blocking water flow, and is changing the weather patterns around the world. And that was, when was that, the 80s? That we were talking about holes in the ozone layer? Nobody talks about them anymore. Pretty sure they're still there. Pretty sure they've probably gotten bigger. Pretty sure that has something to do with what's going on. And can we fix holes in the ozone layer? Not with our current technology. At least not the stuff that's publicly available. And this is where Natara goes off the reservation. But you look at why, if you look at the really old stories about why beings came to this planet to begin with, they had destroyed their atmosphere and they were looking for ways to rebuild it. This planet had a really high supply, a really plentiful supply of gold. So how do we use gold to repair our atmosphere? I don't know. But I really hope somebody's researching it. If nothing else, if we decide that we've totally hosed this planet, we need to move to Mars or someplace, maybe if we figure out what the technology is, we can go build an atmosphere somewhere else. Currently, Mars is the closest planet we have the hope of doing that on. Which is why I think SpaceX and everybody else is trying to get there. Like I said, that was where I was going off the reservation. Sorry.
So if people are feeling, especially coming out of this full moon, like they don't have enough of a strong foundation beneath them, and things are sort of changing too quickly, or maybe they're being asked to change in many ways all at once and are kind of overwhelmed by that. What advice do you have for them?
First and foremost, daily practice. You have to have a daily practice. You have to have that strong personal spiritual foundation that grounds you, that puts you in alignment, that allows you to hear your guidance, whether you think that's your higher self, whether you think it's guardian angels, whether you think it's the divine, whether you think it's a spiritual guide. But we have to be aligning ourselves with our purpose. And the simplest way, not necessarily the easiest, but I don't think there is an easy way to do it. But the simplest way to do it is through daily practice. Have at a bare minimum 8 minutes in the morning and 8 minutes at night where you're doing something to clear your energy, get grounded, get in alignment. If you have the opportunity on a daily basis, look at what your purpose is, what your mission is, and use that as a sort of focal tool, as a metric for, well, what am I supposed to be doing today? How does that fit in with my mission? If some tasks don't fit in with my mission, maybe I don't need to be doing them. Or maybe I need to be thinking about them differently so that I can put them in alignment with my mission. But grounding is key. Grounding is always, my fallback for foundational support. And if people are having problems with all of this crazy water energy going on and this expansiveness, feeling the soles of their feet, you don't have to start grounding by going down. You can start grounding by pulling white light energy down through the crown of your head and sending it all the way down, and sending that down through your feet to connect with the earth. It doesn't have to be the root meditation that I always give people, where you're imagining roots growing out of the soles of your feet. You can start up here. If this is where you're feeling stuff, start up here. Start pouring that, drawing that energy through you and clearing top down rather than bottom up, and ground that way. So grounding is important. Spending a minimum of 8 minutes a day. Disengaging from our thoughts. In my life, it's not always possible to get my head to shut up. But what I can do is work to not engage with it. I can spend 8 minutes in quiet, sitting, meditation, whatever, watching what's going on in my head and my body without picking it up, arguing with it, fighting with it, believing it is truth, without anything, just watching it like a circus train, or like our radio station in the other room that I can't turn off. In my case, it's usually some kind of horrible shock jock yelling at me, but as long as I can understand that, it's that separate from who I really am, and I can do that for like 8 minutes a day, and if you have to build up to that, that's fine. Start with a minute, But spending that time shifting our awareness and not letting the crazy-making part of our head run the show helps us get out of fear. It helps us be empowered. It makes us more effective, And so grounding, doing that, and making sure that we are nurturing and nourishing all 5 aspects of self. So you've got the physical. Do something every day to help you on the physical, whether that's I'm going to eat better today. And eat better today may simply be I'm going to eat less high fructose corn syrup today. It doesn't have to be. I think that we have this idea that if I can't do this big picture shift, that I shouldn't do anything at all, and that's BS. So baby steps. What can I do today to take care of myself on the physical? I can go for a 5-minute walk. I can, eat a salad or eat less high fructose corn syrup or drink more water, because most of us don't drink enough water. So feeding the physical, feeding the emotional. And really that meditative practice is what helps me feed my emotional, because it allows me to balance my shit out. When that crazy making part of my head is running the show, I'm not nurturing myself emotionally. When I can get quiet, that doesn't mean making my head shut up. That just means disengaging from my head. I start to nurture myself on the emotional level. It becomes easier for me to see where I'm overreacting and where I'm having unrealistic expectations. And so I can let go of that. Nurturing myself on the mental level. We thrive, and there's all these studies coming out right now about this, but we thrive and grow when we're learning. And so if we're not challenging ourselves mentally on a daily basis, we're setting ourselves up for dementia, we're setting ourselves up for Alzheimer's, we're setting ourselves up for Parkinson's. There have been all of these studies right now that show that older folks can improve their mental faculties by doing things like crossword puzzles, Sudoku, physical puzzles, learning something. And so challenging yourselves on a daily basis and setting up that habit now, wherever you are in your life, feeds mentally. And so, and I try to do all of these things consciously. So it's like, so I'm going to read this chapter of this useful book tonight. I'm going to do something that nurtures myself on the mental level. So physical, emotional, mental. Spiritually, taking that moment to ground, taking that moment to put myself into alignment with my higher purpose. Taking a minute to check in with God, guardian angel, spiritual connection, archetype of the divine, God, goddess, whatever, or even God's self, that part of me that knows better, that part of me that always knows the truth. But taking time to check in with that and getting quiet and in alignment with that. And then finally, passion. If we're not passionate about something, why are we even bothering? So find things that you're passionate about and go after them. Again, baby steps are fine, but always be working towards your passion. Your passion is going to directly speak to your purpose. The reason that you're passionate about something is because that's your higher self going, yeah, that. Whenever we have that, whenever something makes our heart sing, that's our higher self going, yeah, you're on the right path. And so our passion is in direct relationship to our purpose. And when you're following your passion, you are, in some sense, feeding your God self, you're feeding your passion, you're feeding your purpose. You are doing something important. Even if that thing of importance is painting, We so devalue art in American society. But art is about passion. Art is about standing in our purpose. For so many artists, I don't know an artist in any medium, whether it's dance, music, visual arts, whatever, writing, who isn't actively channeling, God energy, white light energy when they're doing their art. So we need more of that. So, people need to find what they're passionate about and go after it. You don't have to do it for a living. But God, be putting half an hour into it every day, at least. Because you're not fully feeding yourself and you're not fully nurturing yourself if you're not doing that. So those are the ways, the real concrete, tangible ways that people can be helping their foundation and helping them feel more grounded, more okay with all of this energy of flux that's going on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. I hope that